Hey, what's going on, River Valley worship team? Just wanted to do a quick screencast here and talk to you guys about making the transition to the Sunday morning only rehearsal and a couple of practice tips using the Prime multi-track app. But before we jump into the technical side of how to use Prime, I just wanted to say thanks in advance for the extra effort that everybody's going to be making to make this transition to no more midweek rehearsal. And we realize that's going to require more discipline and practice and punctuality, coming on time Sunday morning, aka early, and all that stuff. And we're grateful for you guys as always, and all the effort and the time that you put into the worship ministry. And we're hoping that this is going to be a blessing as well, to help sharpen our skills and give us better practice habits as a team, as musicians, as singers, even as tech people getting ready. And we're also hoping that'll be a blessing from the time management standpoint, having another free night of the week. I know already we've heard lots of positive feedback from people saying that they're looking forward to having a night of the week that's not booked with something. For some people, that might be the only free night that you have, and we're especially looking forward to it because for us personally, it was getting hard for Emily to be able to do all the homeschooling and take care of the kids in the house, and then still get things ready for the Wednesday night rehearsal and get out of the house. So being able to not get out of the house Wednesday is going to be a big help for us personally as a family. So again, just wanted to thank you for helping us make that transition together. Y'all are awesome. So let's jump into Prime right now, and I have You Are Good by Israel pulled up, and I just want to show you some tips for how to use Prime as a practice tool, or some of the ways that I've used it personally when I'm practicing for the rehearsal. And just to back up a hair before you actually get to the Prime stage, I like to start by just listening to the song. So remember, we have a Spotify playlist that you can access. I update it usually every Monday and change it over to the 5 songs that we're going to be doing that week, or the 4 songs that we're going to be doing that week. And it's called the Weekly Worship Set List, and it's under our RVCC channel. I've sent out that link a couple different times, but if you don't have it, just let me know and I can resend that link if you need me to. But that's a great way to, it just will shuffle through those songs that we're going to be playing that week. And that's a good first step, just passive listening when you're driving in the car, when you're working, doing something else, just to have that on in the background is great, passive listening. And then active listening is also good to have your chord chart out in front of you and to listen to it very intentionally and take notes. Where do you come in? Where do you stop playing or stop singing? Where are the stops, the dynamic changes? Where is it soft? Where is it really loud? If there's a particular riff that you play or a lead part, to write that in. That's a really great starting point. And then to actually practice for the rehearsal, at that point, once you have your chord chart ready with your notes and everything that you've written down, then I would come over to Prime and start trying to isolate your individual part. And I'll show you how I like to do that. So what I do first is we'll hit play here so you can see how it sounds.
Intro.
The first thing I do is turn the click down because it's usually way too loud in my ears. And I'll turn the cues down a little bit.
4.
This is Meredith Andrews, by the way. You can change the voice here in the cues.
3, 4.
And I like Meredith's voice because she is a little bit higher than the guy's voice, so I tend to hear her better than the lower pitch of the guy's voice. And another thing that helps when you're practicing at home is go to settings here, this wheel, the top right. And here you can see you can change the cue sound. The default's Taylor, but you can choose whoever you want. And I like to change this from pan to stereo. The default setting is pan, where the cues and the click will come out of the left side and all the other instruments here will come out of the right side. So if you change it to stereo, then suddenly you can hear the song a lot better, especially if you're listening through headphones. And I'll pause there. That's another pro tip. Practice using headphones as much as possible, especially when you're trying to hear your part and hear exactly what's going on and all the nuances. The sound quality that modern cell phones can produce is really pretty poor compared to even a cheap set of headphones, just because you have the sound panned left and right, and it's right there in your ears where you can hear the little subtleties in the recording. And in the studio, a lot of instruments are panned primarily to the left or primarily to the right, and so by having headphones you can a lot of times pick out things that you would otherwise miss. So always practice with headphones, especially when you're trying to learn parts, and that's a great way to be able to hear exactly what's going on. So back to the song here. What I like to do is isolate my instrument, but not completely cut out all of the other instruments. Sometimes I'll just solo an instrument, like if you just want to hear exactly what the bass is doing. But for practice, what I'll typically do is bring down the other instruments quite a bit, but not take them out entirely. That is some funky slap bass. So let's say I'm a bass player practicing for my part. So I would turn down, take that off solo, and I'll just turn down the volume of all these other instruments. So I'm not cutting them out completely, but I'm bringing them down way low in the mix. So that helps me to hear my part in the context of the whole song without just hearing only the bass part, which can be a little bit confusing. It's like, where are we in the song? But if you bring everything else down real low, you can still kind of hear your part in the context of the entire song. And then if there's a part that you really are struggling to hear, you can always solo it and hear exactly what's going on. So that's what I like to do when I'm practicing drums or guitar or whatever it is. I like to keep my instrument at full volume and bring everything else down really low. Now, another thing that you can do is listen to vocal parts. Not in every song, but especially some of the songs that we sing as a choir. The multi-tracks have the parts in them, so like tenor and alto and soprano. So you can say you want to listen to the tenor part, you can solo that. And if you just want some other instruments, you can also bring these down like we did for the other instruments before. Or you can just bring in like one reference instrument like piano. That is a cool piano riff too. So you can just solo the piano and maybe the bass, bring them down a little. So that gives you a little bit of reference, but you don't have all the horns and everything else going on, so you can really hear the parts a little better. Now in this particular part, the tenor is actually splitting into two parts, so you have probably bass and tenor are there on the same track, so you have two different parts. And this is a jazz chord, so you have kind of a almost seemingly clashing harmony there, but it's actually the dominant seventh, which is pretty cool in the context of, you bring in the soprano and the alto, and you can hear how it sounds in context. Very jazzy three-part harmony. But in that case, you can just pick one here. All the time, you are good, all the time. So when you're listening to these parts, just remember that occasionally we may switch them up if, for instance, like the tenor and the alto part and the soprano part are all really high. Occasionally we'll switch and give the tenors the soprano part and give the sopranos the tenor part, but an octave higher, and we'll give the altos we'll give the altos the tenor part, the sopranos the alto part, and the tenors will take the soprano part but an octave down. That's when we want to lower things a little bit. Sometimes some of the gospel parts are insanely high, and so the sopranos drop down to altos, altos drop down to tenors, tenors drop down to the soprano part an octave lower. So just keep that in mind. But if that's the case, then I'll try to make a note of that and remind people as they're using Prime to practice. But this is a great way to solo the parts and hear them. All right, so when you're practicing, what I would recommend is just taking time to go through like we did initially and have your instrument really high in the mix. And then after you get used to your part, you can start to bring the other instruments back up a little bit. And as you practice, you get to practice kind of in the context of the full band with the other instruments a little bit higher once you've learned your part. Another pro tip is to use this metronome here, this metronome setting. So if there's a part that's really hard to play, really fast, like I'll solo the piano here. So it's a really fast piano part. So what I would do here, if you want to learn this, I would slow it down a little bit. So we're at 128 right now. So you can remember the starting point because you want to go back up to it eventually. So remember 128, but you can slow this down all the way to, it doesn't let you go all the way down as low as you want, but it'll lower it quite a bit. So instead of having it at 128, you have 116. So it's still fast, but not nearly as fast as 128, where it's flying through there. So that's another good tip. And then for instruments where you have different parts, like the keys, has multiple parts. You have organ, piano, keys 2, horns, which we don't have, so keys are only shot to play those, but we have tracks that can fire them as well. So when you're going through this, just be mindful of the alternate parts that are there. So I'm going to talk about how to choose those now for keys players and electric guitar players. For everybody else, like choir and bass and acoustic, I think I've covered everything that you guys need to hear. So I just want to thank you again for taking the time to practice. Again, use Prime. It's a great tool, and it will really help you to learn your parts well. And when we come together Sunday morning, we can do an actual run through and just talk about transitions and how we're going to go from one song to the next, and how we're going to do the call to worship, etc., what to do during the communion. We can talk about all those things, but we don't actually have to spend time learning parts. So all that needs to be done at home, and that'll help us to be able to have a smooth run through and to not go over our time limit as well. We want to try to stop playing around 9:40 as people are starting to come into church and that kind of thing. So thanks in advance. If you're a keys player or electric guitar player, stick around because I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how to decide which part to play. But for the rest of y'all, you can sign off. Okay, so I'm going to switch songs here for our guitar players and our keys players. And let's go to Forever. And I'll start on the chorus here since it's a little bit bigger. Let me make sure we're still in stereo. Okay. Alright, so on the chorus, I'm going to talk about guitar first. So we have these two guitar parts here. You can hear them together. And I'm going to loop this also so that we can focus on this section. And this one is kind of what I would call the higher, more lead part. You can hear him kind of play the melody on that high string. So he's playing kind of a combination of lead with some chords. And Electric 2 here is playing more of a light arpeggiated rhythm where he's just arpeggiating through the chords. So if I had to choose between these two parts, I would choose Electric 1 in this case because you have that lead sound and it goes into this next chorus where it's just the lead part, so it's a natural transition into that. So as a general rule of thumb for keys, for guitar, whenever there's a lead part, that's the part you want to learn because that's the part that sticks out in the mix that people will recognize, kind of those signature lines, and that really is a much more defining part than, for instance, this electric guitar 2 part. There's really nothing memorable or defining about this part that's gonna stick out in anybody's mind. It's there in the background, it serves a purpose, but this is one where it would be much better to let the tracks play that and then play this lead part. So always favor the lead part as far as what you're gonna spend time learning, and then let the tracks play the other parts that aren't as prominent or aren't as signature or crucial in the arrangement. Then for keys, here's piano 1. You have, it's kind of low in the mix, but you have these lower bass notes where they're just playing octaves. And then piano 2 is playing something that's much more melodic, and just like the guitar was, is kind of piggybacking off the melody. And so between these two parts, it's a no-brainer. You definitely would want to learn piano 2 part because it's more of a lead part, it's more melodic, it sits higher up in the mix, and it's the part that is going to be more important. So you can let the tracks play this lower piano part. Now, occasionally the parts will switch. It's kind of annoying when it does that, but piano 2 was playing the lead part, but now piano 1 is. But in that case, you can just switch over and play this part that piano 1 plays. Da, 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 da. So that's the signature part during that section that needs to be played. So this may be a song where if you can cover both of those parts, it may be best just to mute both of these because you're going to be playing piano 2 part during the chorus, and you'll switch to the piano 1 part. So it is okay to double on top of the tracks to a certain extent, but if we try to not do that as much as possible. So whatever part you're going to be playing, if you let us know, like I'm playing the piano 2 part, then we'll just turn it off. Or if you say, you know, electric, I'm going to play the electric 1 part, then we'll turn that off so that you can play that, and the only part that's coming through is electric 2. So Sunday morning when we get together, we will ask you guys keys and electric guitar. We're going to be asking you, okay, which part are you going to play? And then if you say piano 1, we're going to turn that off. Or if you say electric 2 or electric 1, we'll turn that off. And that will keep things from being cluttered. Remember to always default to learning the lead parts, the prominent parts, the signature parts, those hooks that are real memorable and stick out in the song. So hopefully that helps. If you guys have any issues learning parts or trying to figure something out, YouTube's a great resource to learn those parts. Sometimes they're in the original keys, which we typically don't play the songs in. It's very rare that we'll actually play a song in its original key because it's usually not very conducive to congregational singing. So some of the tutorials out there, you'll have to kind of transpose them from the original key to whatever key we're doing it in. But you can't always find tutorials on every part, so use your ears, and if you get stuck or having trouble figuring something out, please call me, let me know, and I can try to help you through it over the phone, or we can get together throughout the week. And the more you do that, the more you train your ear to hear these parts, and the more you'll be able to do it independently. But I'm available to help walk you through that process as much as I can, and I'm very happy to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out, and we can get together. And if you have kind of some parts that are problematic from the songs that we're going to be doing for a particular quarter, maybe you can put a list of some different parts that you're having trouble learning for different songs. Just make a list of what those parts are and where they fall in the song and that kind of thing, and we can get together on a weekend or something and just work on those parts. So I'm very happy to do that. I would love to help you out in that way if I can. So again, don't hesitate to let me know if you want to get together, if you want to talk over the phone to try to figure something else out. We can FaceTime or Skype and look at something together, even if I'm traveling. All right. Thanks again for all the work you guys are putting into learning these parts. It's always a challenge to learn it, but once you do, it really makes the song come together and makes the song sound like the arrangement that the artist intended. So we appreciate all your efforts and hope this was helpful.